Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news.
And welcome back to another edition of Capital Connection. Fridays during the Noon Report, we give you, the listener, direct connection to what's happening in Albany and Harrisburg with the experts on the issues. At the state capitals, they are Jason McGuire of New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedoms and Michael Geer at the Pennsylvania Family Institute. Jason, let's jump right in. The big question, of course, will we know by November 3rd? That is the big bugaboo when it comes to this hotly contested election, just over a month away now. Will we have a winner, or is this going to take days, weeks, perhaps even months to come to that conclusion? What say you, sir?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to know on November 3rd, but ultimately that is up to the voters to determine whether or not we do. If voters turn out and vote in person on November 3rd, and it's a blowout, then you could certainly know on that night. But more likely, because of the astronomical number of absentee ballots that are being returned, it's going to take time to figure out who is the winner of that election. So that's something we're certainly watching, and I'm encouraging people, man, if you want to make sure your vote counts, and if you're able to do so, not endangering yourself, get out and vote in person on November 3rd.
Yeah, it is the hallmark of our democracy, Michael, the peaceful transfer of power. It was the last question at that food fight, they called it debate, in Cleveland earlier this week. The president seems to suggest these mail-in ballots are a big deal. I'll ask you what I asked Jason. Will we know by election night who that winner is? What do you think that interim period might look like, regardless of how long it is?
Yeah, President Trump even mentioned Philadelphia specifically in that debate and talking about potential voter fraud. Historically, at least in the last few decades, Pennsylvania has not really counted much in the presidential election. It was a foregone conclusion which way Pennsylvania was going to go. But now, as a swing state, and with the imposition of changes made by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, ballots are going to be counted well past November 3rd. So I encourage just what Jason said, which is for people who can get out to vote in person to do so here in Pennsylvania. That's the way we're going to have the clearest understanding what happens on November 3rd.
All right, let's talk about the pandemic for a bit and how this is impacting the church. I had an attorney on this week, Jason, at the center of this controversy in the Southern Tier, saying, I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said, but he said, our first freedom, the freedom of religion, is not contingent on pandemics. It is not contingent on an entire population being healthy. We now see that the governor may appoint a state police task force to enforce mask wearing at Jewish churches just north of New York City. Does this attorney have a point here? Seems like a lot of focus, a lot of firepower in containing the coronavirus is directed at churches.
Well, I think there is some rationale to that argument that there is this first liberty. I mean, there's this constitutional right to religious freedom. I do believe that government, in times of public emergency, has the ability to limit some of those freedoms for a limited period of time. But that is not what is happening here. We are experiencing a longer, more drawn-out process of curtailing of our religious liberty than we saw even during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. So this is something that now I just think is out of control. And the good news is, little by little, those liberties are being restored as courts are beginning to recognize that this cannot go on forever. And I think that's what's going to happen, is we're going to have to claw back our constitutional freedoms.
You know, when the Bill of Rights was written, there was this thing called smallpox, which was making its way throughout the colonies. And so, you know, it's not something new that we've dealt with, health crisis, but, you know, does our first freedom, and by that I also mean the freedom of speech, Michael, because now Governor Wolf is pointing to the president saying, you know, you shouldn't have these campaign rallies because you're putting people at risk here. Does the right to assemble, that First Amendment freedom that we all cherish, does that supersede some of the concerns that others might have here, you know, 7 months into this pandemic?
Well, Governor Wolf has a disease called do as I say, not as I do. I mean, we all remember, those people who are here in Pennsylvania remember Governor Wolf participating in a Black Lives Matter rally, walking down the street carrying signs in a big protest here in Pennsylvania. So I think it's kind of the pot calling the kettle black when he says the president shouldn't be doing that. I think he is looking to try to restrict the legitimate political activism in Pennsylvania and the enthusiasm that many in our state feel towards the Trump candidacy. I mean, he's had massive crowds in places like Middletown at the Harrisburg Airport last week and other places all across the state. Mike Pence, the same thing. And certainly we don't want to see that suppression. People should work to stay safe and social distance, but the ability to speak out on political things is vitally important.
Yeah. The governor, Governor Cuomo, wants a task force to make sure that a COVID vaccine is safe. He's not trusting what the federal government is saying here. When we get that vaccine is anybody's guess, but we in New York won't get it until it's passed muster with not one but two different task force that he appoints. Is this prudent or is this politics? He does, after all, have a book coming out in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think this is more politics than prudence at this point, and I'm not surprised. I mean, you can't burp in my state without getting the bill passed. I mean, it's just getting more and more difficult to be able to exercise the freedoms that we have. And so this is another example of where, on one hand, the governor criticizes the federal government, but then when you see strong action from the federal government to control this coronavirus, he's pushing back. And it's just not healthy for the governor to take this course of action.
Of course, we're all going to be watching October 12th, that's a Monday, when the Senate confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett begin. She has been busy making the rounds on Capitol Hill, meeting with senators that will help decide her fate, but she unable to meet with one senator, and that senator is from your state because he won't meet with her, and that is Senator Bob Casey. Given the track record of his father, are you surprised, Michael?
Well, if I were expecting him to act like his father, I would be surprised, but he has not been acting like his father for some time now, although he claims to be very pro-life. Many of his votes and many of his actions in the Senate don't bear that out, and this is not a surprise that he's not meeting with Amy Coney Barrett. It should be a surprise to Pennsylvanians, though, that some people still think Bob Casey can be counted on as pro-life. The real issue and the opposition coming to this nomination of Judge Barrett has to do with the sanctity of life in Roe versus Wade. And if Bob Casey were legitimately pro-life, he would want to see her go to the Supreme Court with the ability to speak boldly about the issue of the sanctity of life.
Yeah, we thought that debate in Cleveland was a slugfest. We ain't seen nothing yet because I predict that Senate confirmation hearing could get downright ugly. And then let's just talk curriculum to end today, Jason. The president at that debate took some heat for promoting a pro-America education curriculum. You're writing about this on your website. Do you support this effort? And there's also some BLM, Black Lives Matter curriculum that's making the rounds in Buffalo. Talk, if you would, to those 2 points.
Yeah, we certainly support the president's efforts to establish the 1776 Commission. We believe that students should be taught the truth about American history, not a barrage of left-wing attacks or a Pollyannish narrative of perfection. By contrast, what we're seeing in Buffalo City schools right now is the Black Lives Matter, which is undermining the nuclear family unit, and that's a real concern for us. I think we need to get back to our roots, and certainly the 1776 Commission the president's promoting is a step in the right direction.
Got time for one more question. Michael, you surprised at all by Governor Ridge's endorsement. Former Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge, America's first Homeland Security Secretary, endorsing Joe Biden this week. How big of a boost does that give him in Pennsylvania?
I don't think it gives him much of a boost for Joe Biden. I don't think too many people pay attention to Governor Ridge and what he has to say. We've observed him from his governorship on down. He had something called the Ridge Policy Group, which has been lobbying for LGBT issues and against the sanctity of life here in Harrisburg. So it's par for the course for Governor Ridge to be taking this tack.
All right, and just like that, we're out of time. It's the fastest 10 minutes in radio. It goes pretty fast, but there's so many other issues we can't get to. If you have questions about what's going on in Pennsylvania, Michael, you have a wonderful website, sir, where folks can go, if you would.
PAFamily.org.
And stay informed on the issues in New York as well. Jason McGuire.
AlbanyUpdate.com.